Hey everybody, zjayfi here. I wanted to go ahead and do a video review of The Last of Us Part 2. I've been waiting for this game a long time. I know a lot of other people have too. And this game is so controversial right now. Well, it's not controversial as a result of the game. It's controversial as a result of a few aspects of its marketing. The fact that it got unanimously high critical acclaim, and yet some people are very, very happy with what this unhappy with what this game turned out to be. So I'm going to jump right into it, and you guys can make up your mind whether or not you think it's worth playing. Naughty Dog's latest offering was released last week under what we would say are interesting circumstances. Naughty Dog flooded the market with what we could only describe as deceptive advertising, and then they put an extraordinarily strict review embargo on this game, forcing reviewers not to mention anything from the first 2 hours of the game or the last 12 hours of the game. So I'm just going to go ahead and start off by saying this game is not what people are hoping for. It's not a fan service sequel. Now, this is a new game that tries some interesting things and is full of memorable moments and some truly terrifying moments. But in the end, it stumbles under the weight of its own ambition. This is not a bad game by any means. Let me say that right off the bat. This is not a bad game. But unlike the original, it's not going to leave you pondering the selfish nature of love or whether the bombs you formed were worth dooming mankind. The entire game seems deliberately designed to do three things. And that's to deliberately not give you what you want. In glowing and positive reviews, they call this subverting all expectations. 2, it's designed to convince you that you were wrong for wanting Ellie to succeed in her revenge quest by pulling some bad TV writing tricks, notably contagious pregnancy and the Deus Ex Machina, which is to write a character into a corner it's impossible to get them out of, and then always have someone come to their rescue at the last second. And 3, this game seems designed to make you feel bad about having been sold a revenge quest. So I'm going to keep this a spoiler-free review, meaning I'm not going to reveal what happened in The Last of Us 2. But I am going to describe how the game is designed to make you feel, and in order to do that, I'm going to use some references to some other pieces of media that you may or may not have seen or be familiar with. In using these references, I may end up giving something away, but unfortunately this can't really be regarded as a spoiler, as it just reveals how truly unoriginal the plot of The Last of Us 2 is. So let's start there. The originality of the plot. In a game like this, and like the original Last of Us, the gameplay takes a backseat to the story. Now, we didn't mind playing a simple game with simple mechanics because the story was so unique and so original and so different to anything we had played before. This time around, gameplay takes an even smaller role in the overall experience, as most of the play options that develop in the skill trees you progress are rendered largely meaningless by the structure of the game itself. In other words, you're going to spend a lot of time developing abilities you'll never really get a chance to put to any use. So with gameplay mechanics and systems taking a back seat to present a largely story-centric experience, the story really has to be the star of the show. Just okay is not going to cut it when you trim interactivity in favor of plot. Well, originally the game was pitched to the consumer as revenge story, Ellie's revenge story. Not the most original plot, but a classic one nonetheless. Great works of art and literature full of revenge stories. Hamlet, Great Expectations, The Count of Monte Cristo, and more contemporarily, there have always been great video game revenge stories, like Assassin's Creed 2 and Grand Theft Auto 3 are wonderful revenge stories. The Last of Us 2 goes hard to market itself this way. It launches the revenge story in the typical Bourne Supremacy, Braveheart, Diamonds Are Forever manner, and then pulls out the rug from under your feet halfway through. And if that wasn't bad enough, it spends its time guilting you for ever having felt this way. It gaslights you to try and engender feelings of compassion and mercy, and in some moments it's successful. There are moments where you genuinely feel a bond with this character. But in a few short hours, I cannot possibly develop the affection and fondness I have for Ellie. Ellie and I have history together. This new girl is as likable as any murderess can be, I suppose, but we don't have the time invested together it would take for me to be rooting for mercy for her. She doesn't have time to develop the dramatic clout it would take for me to turn my back on a beloved original protagonist. And that brings us to another story problem here. The villainess that we're asked to feel compassion for isn't the only one who gets asked to carry too much dramatic weight in too little time. Last of Us 2 features several dramatic companions who go about the adventuring with the player. Too many, in fact. The game features nothing short of 8 different companions that will accompany you along your adventure. Some exist only to die. In a revenge story, this is par for the course. It reminds me of critiques of 2016's The Revenant, where some reviewers noted that DiCaprio's son existed in the story only to die, to set off the revenge quest. While these characters in The Last of Us 2 don't exist solely to die, and many of them don't die, they don't have enough appreciable screen time to make them interesting enough for us to learn to care about them. Lack of screen time for minor players is a problem in a script that's packed from top to bottom with them. There's dozens of them, in and out amongst the game's fractured timeline. But this matter is compounded by the game's bisected sequences. So let's talk about that, the elephant in the room. To do this, I'm going to talk about Metal Gear Solid 2. Released for the PlayStation near its launch in the year 2001, Metal Gear Solid 2 was and is an amazing game. It pushed the limits of gaming at the time and was received warmly by all the critics and got mega reviews. But players, including myself, were initially disappointed with it. That's because Metal Gear Solid 2 did 3 things that players didn't like. First off, it marketed itself dishonestly. Go back and watch the original trailer for Metal Gear Solid 2. Just boot up the game and wait for the trailer to kick in. It shows all kinds of footage of the new bosses and the plant chapter, with occasional cutaways to Snake aiming a pistol or jumping over a ledge to take position against them. But in fact, when we bought the game, it turned out you only played as Solid Snake for the very first hour, and then Raiden took over and the plant chapter suddenly turned out to be the bulk of the game. The second thing it did is that it's in its late stages it took a plot twist that was stunning to say the least. You found out that everything you had done so far was a simulation, and that the people you'd been risking your life on behalf of weren't even real. It's not fun to watch a game eat itself, and then while shocking plot twists are part and parcel of a horror survival game, here there's such a thing as deliberately making a player uncomfortable, and this makes the player feel disrespected and not valued. Thirdly, Metal Gear Solid 2's final mistake was to presume that the player would be happy about the new material regardless of these first 2 errors. Had Kojima and Konami simply marketed the game as new story with new protagonist and Snake as alongside for the ride, I think players would have bought into it. Had the storyline, with its constant twists and turns, not gone totally over the top with absolutely nothing you have done up to this point means anything, and even your handlers are computer simulations, then I think the players would have at least felt valued. The grossest error, however, is the third. The idea that we will be happy just to have some new material regardless of what it is. This is the worst because the first 2 errors tell us something quite disturbing. That Kojima thought the game wouldn't sell very well if it told us beforehand that they were pulling Solid Snake and introducing a new main playable character. And 2, they consciously designed a story to purposefully make the player feel like they weren't getting what they wanted. These 2 combined add up to a very bad looking picture, which is that they designed something they knew no one would buy if they had all the information, so they concealed the information to sell a product they knew the consumer base didn't want. Metal Gear Solid 2 did sell very well, and after players got used to the idea of playing as Raiden and watching the game destroy itself in the second half, it's actually become one of the more popular Metal Gear games. It made a full recovery and is now revered as a classic in that canon. Why the hell am I talking about Metal Gear Solid 2? Well, this is a spoiler-free way of explaining to you just what you can expect from Last of Us 2. There are large chunks of the game deliberately concealed from the prospective buyers, and what is being marketed to you as a revenge story starring Ellie from The Last of Us is actually anything but. If you enjoyed Metal Gear 2's narrative structure and don't mind having the rug pulled from under you, you will probably have a good time with this game. Metal Gear Solid 2 is not a bad game, and neither is The Last of Us 2. But it's probably not going to provide that direct sequel experience if that's what you're looking for. So to sum it up, a combination of high expectations for this sequel, some very controversial design choices, and a somewhat dishonest marketing campaign have put this sequel a ways from what it could have been. Even if they had just come out and said honestly that the game was going to take some hard turns into a place a lot of players might not want to go, it probably wouldn't have felt so bad as being marketed an Ellie's revenge plot and then find out you're going to be away from her for huge chunks of time with a new batch of characters that you're going to have less time with to carry an even bigger dramatic weight than the character with whom you already have history could carry. Last of Us 2, finally, is not a bad game. Let me say this again. I realize I've been sitting here shitting all over it for 10 minutes. Last of Us 2 is not a bad game. I really enjoyed the 25 to 30 hours I spent on it. But it is not even close to what I was expecting, and it's not even close to what sold me on it to begin with. It's already financially successful, which unfortunately means we can expect this kind of wool-over-the-eyes marketing to continue. But there's just not enough time to develop this many characters successfully, and certainly not enough time for me to just forget about the bond and the history that I have with the character from the first game. I would say that in the end, this game is rightfully deserving of a 7. But considering that in modern video games, and even an average AAA title gets a 7.5 just because AAA titles are so much better than all the other things put out, let's say that this one is probably an 8. It's better than average. I mean, it is better than average. This is an exceptionally enjoyable experience, and if you like the game, you are going to have a good time with this one. But it's also hampered by the enormous shoes that it has to fill and the incredible standards set up by its predecessor. It falls flat in that regard, unfortunately. I'm reminded that Metal Gear Solid 3 represented what was called a return to form for the series and was received much more warmly by the player base than the previous installment was. It wasn't derided as fan service either, considering it had a whole new timeline and followed a previously villainous character. I hope Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann can find a way to get the third project into something more along these lines, because new characters and new ideas aren't bad things. They're good things. Unfortunately, I think Last of Us 2 just dies by too much of a good thing. Just not enough time, too many new people, too many new ideas, not enough familiarity, not enough nostalgia, not enough of what we were looking for. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video footage, and write your own opinion. I mean, let me know what you thought of the game. If you enjoyed it, if you didn't enjoy it, let me know. If you think I'm just full of shit and a complete idiot and this is one of the best games ever made, let me know. Well, maybe just let me know and without insulting me, please. Without making it personal. I will respect your opinion as long as we don't make it personal. But like I said, I think if you played the first game, you're really going to like this one. If you just listen to everything I said and you remember Metal Gear Solid 2, maybe this isn't the game for you. So, thanks for watching. Have a great night.